Hi kawan, welcome to EDCReady. Today we are finally doing a full review of this guy. This is the Quiet Carry Waypoint in OD Green G10. I got this guy right off of their website. I believe you can only buy Quiet Carries on their website new. So just keep in mind you can't find this on like Blade HQ or Knife Center or whatever. Only from their particular website. So I'll try to remember to link it in the description box down below. Next up, they have two versions. They have this version which is in G10, and in fact all the other G10 versions are pretty much the same price, $245 US. Whereas if you get the full titanium version, which is Vanax steel with titanium handles, it comes closer to about 300 USD, something like that. So with that out of the way, let's start with some basic measurements. We have here my scale, a reading in grams, so I will translate that to ounces. We are coming in at 78 grams, which comes to about 2.75 ounces. Next up, let's talk about this dimension. We have the length dimension. Let's talk about this little blade right here. The blade itself is coming in at about 3.3 inches. Okay, that is 84 millimeters. We have here a very long sharpened edge of 82.6 millimeters or 3¼ inches. So the majority of the blade length is the length of the sharpened edge, which is very nice. We have a nice thin edge. Let me just get this at the top. We have a nice thin edge at, there we go, 0.1 inches on my calipers. Let me just make sure they are centered properly. There we go. Something's not right. Come on. There we go. 0.1 inches at the top there. Kind of 0.1, 0.11. I don't know if it's... Oh, there we go. Okay, once I flattened it. There we go. 0.08 inches. Very, very thin. We have here, in millimeters, we have it at 2.3 millimeters. So super, super thin blade. Now let's go into the handles right here. Handles are coming in at 10.5 millimeters or 0.41 inches, so very, very nice, very, very thin. We have also blade height of knife height of 0.9 inches or 2.3 millimeters, and a total handle length of, let's see if I can get this, 107.4 millimeters or 4.22 inches. So with that out of the way, let's get into this review. We're gonna go from tip to butt, what I like, what I don't like. And for this one, I can only really compare it to one knife, which is my other high-end knife. I only have here the ZT-0450CF, and it's only fair to compare these guys because every other knife I have is like $100 cheaper at minimum. Like this guy is like $100 cheaper. This guy is $150 cheaper. So let's compare it with a knife that's very close in terms of its price. Okay, let's talk about this blade right here. I really, really like this blade. This blade is an amazing blade. You saw the thickness of it, 0.08 inches. Not only that, it comes to a very high hollow grind. This is not a straight edge like you see here. Yeah, this is not a straight grind that you see here. This is a hollow grind, which means this guy comes to an extremely thin edge, and this guy cuts through things like a lightsaber, like plastic bags or packaging that I want to open up when they come over to my house. It just cuts through everything like a freaking lightsaber, and that is amazing. We have nice blade shape. We have a lot of flat, little bit of belly, and you have a nice pointy tip. Just showing you guys that tip there. Super, super pointy, great for piercing through packaging, cardboard. Just a fantastic knife overall, fantastic blade overall. I do like more of this kind of blade shape. It's more of a worn, cliffy, straighter blade shape with less of a belly, because I like doing these kind of pull cuts. But definitely this guy doesn't really have as round or as deep of a belly as like a drop point, so that's very, very nice. Although this is a drop point, it does have not that deep of a belly, a little bit of a shallow belly. Really like that. The other thing I really like about this blade is the material. The material here is Vanax. Now, Vanax is one of those blade steels that are not stainless. They are pretty much stain proof. You have stainless steel blades. For example, this guy is in Japan Akudo. We have here, which is a 440C. we have on this Spyderco, this is a CTS BD1N, and all these blade steels are stainless, which means they stain less. In certain situations, very salty, very wet situations, they can still show rust over time or corrosion over time. But Vanax just doesn't do that. In every practical sense, this will not rust on you, whether you are sweating on it, whether you're washing it with salt water. Unless you're purposefully trying your hardest to make it rust, it's not gonna rust on you in any practical way. It shares that same characteristic with this knife. This is a Spyderco Salt. It has that same characteristics as LC200N, which is just completely rust proof in every practical sense of the word. But the advantage this guy has over LC200N is that this is also a very hard steel. Hardness is important for keeping the sharpened edge of the blade sharp. So the harder the steel, the more the longer it can hold its edge, its sharpened edge. So not only is this a completely rust-free steel, not only is it very hard, so it's going to hold its edge for a really long time, but it's also very thin and has a hollow grind. This is just one of my favorite blades. That I've ever owned. Okay, another thing I really like about this is that it is also stone washed. Now, in some knives, you're gonna get like a satin belt finish like this. You can see here in the Spyderco, you can kind of see the lines of the belt finish because they kind of grind it or sharpen it with the belt, and then the belt kind of creates this line. Okay, you also have a coating, like on this guy. This has a DLC coating. And then, what else do I have here? This is also a stone wash finish actually. You can kind of see that this is a bit more of a finer stone wash, so it's a little bit more reflective. This guy here, also a stone wash, and what I really like about stone washes is that the edges of the blade tends to be very nicely rounded. Sometimes you can get blades that the edges can be quite sharp. I don't really, maybe the Gonzo is a good example. No, yeah, so the Gonzo, we can show it here. Because of its belt finish, the corners up here can be relatively sharp. Okay, it's not going to cut you, but it can be a little bit uncomfortable. Because of the stone washing, the edges here are nice and smooth. And it's not just nice and smooth and rounded, it's also chamfered a little bit. If you can see here, there's like a little bit of a micro chamfer that they did there. And then they also continue that chamfering on top at the sides of the jimping here. Coupled with that stone wash and that roundingness and that chamfering, this is a very nice smooth surface at the top right here. And even the jimping, you're going to get traction because, well, you're going to get a little bit of friction here, a little bit of extra friction because of the jimping, but it's not going to be sharp. You do not have that Spyderco thing that, you know, you have the jimping at the top here, and then you have these sharp little corners up at the top and up at the corners of the jimping. So that's really, really nice. Very, very ergonomic blade portion itself. Okay, next thing I want to talk about these thumb studs. Now the thumb studs here, they're nice and comfortable. It's not pointy like what you get in a Sebenza, but you do get a nice purchase up on this side of the thumb stud. You can really easily pop it out. Now, you have this scalloping right here, which kind of gives a lot of room for your thumb. And how you want to open up this knife is that you actually want to use the angle of that scalloping to kind of guide your thumb in. Now, on the other side, we have much less, we still have the scalloping, but there's much less area for your finger to dig into. Kind of like, to kind of open it from this side, you really need to dig the flesh of your fingers. Really, like, you really gotta press it into this little gap right there. And once you get it in that position, you can very much pop it out. Alright, let's move back a little bit from the blade, which I really love, back to the pivots. Back to the handle. The handle here is a G10. It does come in titanium for an extra $50, but in this case it's G10. It is OD green, but they also come in other colors. I think they have black and I can't remember what other colors they have, but you can check it out on the website. So far, this is really, really nice. It's not as brown as, like, say, the Ranger green of my Benchmade bug up, and I really like the shade of green. Super, super nice. Now let's talk about the hardware. The hardware here is, I have two problems with the hardware. The first of which is that it's made out of titanium, and the problem with titanium is that it's not as hard as steel. So titanium tends to strip out a little bit easier than like something hardware that is steel. Another thing is that the screw hole is actually quite shallow. And the problem with that is, number one, you can strip it a little bit easier because it's titanium and it's shallow. But number two, unless you have perfectly like fresh bits, you are going to experience quite a bit of jumping if those bits are kind of rounded off a little bit. It's not like the ZT one here. This little hole right here is really deep. That's what she said. So it makes it a lot easier to unscrew this guy. But for this guy, it is quite shallow, so you got to make sure you're using fresh, good bits. One thing I do like is that to take these screws out, they're both T8 screws. Now I'll get to the screws a little bit once I go a little bit further back. I'll save that for the end. My biggest gripe, my biggest problem about this knife. But T8 here, very easy. It's quite easy to take off, to take this knife apart. In the titanium version, all you need to do is take off this screw, and then the knife falls apart. And then you can take the knife apart. Fortunately, with the G10 version, you have 2 extra screws on the inside, which I'll show you guys a little bit later. My problem with those screws on the inside is that you don't even need them. I've actually... know what? I'll save that for the end. Okay, let's move back a little bit. Let's talk about the pivots itself. Nice and flush. Sometimes you're gonna get screws that kind of like jut out a little bit like that. We have another example. Here you go. On the Para 3 lightweight, it also sticks out a little bit like that. This guy, on the other hand, nice and smooth all the way around, and all the screws are nice and smooth. It's smooth here, it's smooth here, smooth here, smooth here. Even under the pocket clip, it is completely like flush to the scale itself. So that makes it very good to, very easy to kind of stick this underneath the seam of your pants. Alright, let's talk about the detent. Detent, when it first came out of the box, my god, this detent was like super hard. I could only flick out with my thumb. And to get the thumb studs on the other side took a lot of, like, it had quite a bit of a learning curve, and I had to take it apart, clean it out, continue flicking it for 3 days, and then once that breaks in, this is so nice. This detent has now become my favorite detent, possibly matching the ZT detent, which I really love. I still feel like the ZT detent is the best for a flipper, but for a thumb stud knife, this has won my award for the best detent for a thumb stud knife. Now, you can really load up on it. It used to be stronger. It has broken in very nicely, and now it's no longer hurting your thumbs. My thumbs for the first 3 days of owning this knife, my fingers for the first 3 days of owning this knife were really sore, and I even developed a little bit of a callus there, as you can see there. But now it's just perfectly tuned. You can load it very nicely, and then it pops, and then it fires out really quickly. This guy just fires out super nicely. And as I already mentioned, to open up the knife, to flick out the knife on the other side, you really need to dig your finger flesh into this little gap right there, because there's just not as much room here on the other side. Compared to this guy, you can really purchase your fingers and your thumbs quite nicely onto this thumb stud. But on this side, you really gotta follow the scallop, and then you really gotta press your flesh into this little gap. See, I already filled it just now. See, filled again. Filled again. Let's switch angles. See, filled again. No. There we go. I'm still on the learning curve. And when you switch it over to the left side, okay, it's a little bit easier. But on the reverse side, it fires out as well. But I'm still on that little bit of learning curve. Come, let's try again. There we go. One more time. Third time's the charm. There we go. So just keep in mind, this is not a very lefty friendly knife. No, a liner lock is not very lefty friendly, and then definitely the lack of gap here is going to make it a little bit more difficult to open it with your left hand or to reverse flick it, although that is a learned skill that you can get. Let's move back a little bit. Let's talk about the pocket clip. Pocket clip, not too big of a fan of this pocket clip. I do like wire pocket clips, but I feel like the best wire pocket clip is specifically on the Para 3 lightweight, because the corners here, okay, it doesn't actually have an angle. It's just completely round and it's completely smooth. This guy has a bit of a right angle that goes up. See, it kind of bends upwards, and sorry, it goes up and then it bends down at like a 45 degree, at like a 70 degree angle or something like that. And then you do get this little hot spot in the clip. When you really bear down on it, you can definitely feel this little hot spot. I am thinking of ordering a Spyderco wire clip and then replacing it with this. Now, I did check. The Spyderco wire clips do fit in this in terms of its width, but I would need to kind of cut off the tips here, because these little tips here at the bottom, Okay, that is just a little bit too long to fit into this well. However, like the width can fit into the well. Okay, another thing I don't like about this pocket clip is that I wish there was a little bit more ramp here. Sometimes again, you can get a little bit tough to get your finger underneath here. And I also wish it had a little flat spot that kind of jarts out like that. Okay, just like with this guy, it bends down, then bends up, and then has a little flat portion that goes at the that goes towards the front. And the reason I like that is because it adds to a little bit better ergonomics. You know, you don't have a pointy bit here that sticks out like that and then kind of pokes into your hand. This is just a lot more comfortable in where the clip falls. This guy, the clip is a bit of an ergonomic demerit on this knife. Speaking of ergonomics, I just found out that through this knife. Now, keep in mind, this knife, when you hold this knife, you definitely, it feels secure in your hand because you have this nice finger groove here for your finger to go into. You have a little bit of a kick up here that kind of that your pinky can hold into. You get the grip of the G10. You even get a little bit of, I was just complaining that this does give a little bit of a hot spot, but it does provide some friction in the hand as well. And it's just that to my particular hands, I found out through this knife that I'm not big of a fan. I'm not that big of a fan of knives that have this kind of straight handle ergonomics. Now, I much prefer knives that have this little turn down portion right here. I feel like that fits in my hands a lot more comfortably. Here it is in my other liner lock. It has a bit of a turn down. It turns down a little bit right here, fits to the hand very comfortably. And yeah, just this kind of straight edge here. It's fine if you're holding it like a hammer grip like that. Okay, but if you want to hold it like a pocket knife, which is how I hold it when I want to cut it, where I kind of hold it up a little bit forward and I have my thumb on the jimping right here, so I can do kind of cuttings and push cuts. Yeah, this is not like the best ergonomic grip. It's secure, it's fine, it's definitely workable, but it is just not the most ergonomic design. I found out that this kind of straight handle doesn't really work well for me because I do like to grip it a little bit forward. And then I just feel like there's a little bit of empty space here, and then it's kind of pivoting up, and then it's kind of like the fulcrum is here, so it's kind of like tipping, like, and then it's kind of like pressing up into my hand a little bit. But that emptiness here, definitely feel that compared to better ergonomic knives. I'm not gonna compare it to Spyderco. Spyderco's ergonomics are great. Let's talk about ZT. You have that little turn down where your fingers can wrap around. As for this, you don't quite have that, so just a little bit less security in the hand. That being said, safe to use in the hand. Okay, another thing I want to talk about is that the liners here are actually made out of LC200N, which is another one of those steels that are rust-proof in every practical reason. Now, to put that into context, this is not a limited edition. This is an upgraded Spyderco Native 5. Pretty much. This is the Native 5 Salt, which uses LC200N as its blade steel. So this blade is definitely better than H1. It's somewhere around VG10 154 cm in terms of edge retention, which is great to go, which is fantastic. One of my favorite steels for pocket knives ever, and it is damn near rust proof in every functional situation. They took that steel and then they turned it into the liners. Okay, so you have very hard steel here that is completely rust proof. You have very good steel here that is also completely rust proof. So if you ask me, like, that justifies the price of this knife, which is much higher than that Spyderco Native 5 Salt. Another thing is that the detent ball is also ceramic, so it just makes sure that this just, again, it's going to make this knife completely rust resistant, rust proof, because ceramic doesn't rust. And then that is what they use instead of a steel ball detent. Another thing that helps with this rust resistance is that the hardware is titanium, as I already mentioned. So I talked a lot about titanium being a softer steel. It might strip out, but the great thing about titanium is that it is actually pretty much near rust proof. Like, there's no functional way for you to make it rust, in my understanding. In terms of the washers here, they use phosphor bronze washers. Again, a material that's extremely resistant to rust. Maybe not as rust proof as LC200N or Vanax, but definitely this is called an elemental knife. If you look at the category of knives on their website, this is parked under elements because it is a knife meant to go against the elements. But now let's talk about my biggest gripe, or my biggest problem about this knife. And for that, I'm going to need to take this knife apart. Okay, I'm going to need T8 screws, T8 bits right here. And now what I'm going to do is I am going to just take this knife apart. So I'm using a T8 bit right here. There we go, T8H, don't know if you guys can read that. And this is not a fresh T8 bit. As you can see, the edges are a little bit rounded. So let's hope we don't get a lot of jumping. There we go. I didn't put any Loctite because it doesn't really need any Loctite. It doesn't really unscrew itself as the day goes by. Okay, so that comes out T8 as well. So just like with the titanium versions, not virgins, you take out that screw, you take out that screw, and the knife can just come apart like that. And that's fine, it's perfectly good to go. Unfortunately, first time I took apart this knife, that is not how it went. Let me tell you how I needed to take this knife apart for the first time. I needed to then unscrew this, take out the clip, which is also T8 screws, and then once I take this off, see these two holes here? This hole and this hole? This hole holds the liners. And there were actually two screws here. There was a screw here and there was a screw here. And then that held in the liners. So it went from a very easy disassembly, which I showed you guys just now, just take apart this screw and this screw, to having to take apart 3 screws, including the pocket clip, lift up this, and then I need to take some T6 screws and unscrew that screw and unscrew that screw. Now mind you, they were both titanium screws also, but I don't know why they needed to do that. Like the knife I can take the knife apart just fine with those 2 screws, and that is how it worked on the titanium model. I do not know why they needed to do that on the G10 model. I don't know if it's a strength issue, but yeah, I mean, that's just a super long rant. And the reason why I'm ranting is because see that there? That is the body of the screw. The head of the screw broke off. And yeah, luckily, and things that it completely functions. Like, I can take that apart. That's the body of, there we go. That's the body of the screw right there. Like, the head doesn't need to be there. And the knife works perfectly fine without those stupid screws on the inside. So yeah, that's my biggest gripe about that. As a result, this knife is completely still perfectly functioning knife. I can take it apart, I can put it back together, I can service it, and I do not need to actually have those 2 screws on the inside to just complicate the whole situation. Like, the reason why I wanted this knife is because of its lack of complexity and lack of and ease of maintenance. But those kind of things just made it a bit more of a headache, or in this case a lot more of a headache than it needed to. By the way, it has a non-free spinning pivot, which I really like. Yeah, so rant over. So while I put this knife together, I want to tell you guys about my final, but by the way, G10 backspacer, matching OD green, very very nice. Okay, so now I'm going to talk to you guys about the conclusion of this and what I think about the knife. The knife is great, guys. The knife is so fantastic. The knife is, I had high expectations of this knife, to be honest, and this knife just met those expectations with the exception of the stupid screws on the inside. It is easy to take apart, okay? Well, it's easy to take apart now that I don't have those 2 screws on the inside. It is a completely rust-proof knife. It is a knife that doesn't cause any headaches anymore. Okay? It is a knife that has great action. It is a knife that can hold its edge for a really long time. It is a knife that is fantastic in the pocket. Did I mention that? This deep carry pocket clip, coupled along with the fact that it is a very slim knife to go into the pocket, you can carry this and then you do not even feel it. And I've had a Benchmade bug out. And this knife rivals that of a Benchmade bug out when it comes to ease of carry in the pocket. So would I recommend this knife? Yes, this knife is a fantastic knife. Now, would I recommend people to buy this knife? Depends. The price of this guy is definitely up there. This is my most expensive knife at 245 USD. It is definitely worth the price. You know, just the liners alone, it's the same steel as a Spyderco Native 5 Salt uses for its blade. It has an amazing design, amazing steel, blade shape, blade design, fantastic. Ergonomically, it's pretty good, although my preference is I prefer a bit more of a turn down. Color is great. You know, just a lot of details here were done very very nice. I do love the the Quiet Carry, the 4 dot symbols that they have here. This is kind of like their design identity. Just overall, fantastic knife. I love it despite those shortcomings, which once I removed them from my life, those shortcomings were no longer shortcomings. And yeah, I just really like this knife. Now I know why it was one of the finalists of Nick Shabazz's Knife of the Year award in 2020. I think, I can't remember what year this was for, 2019 maybe. Okay guys, that is it. Do leave a comment below, and if you guys have any questions, don't worry, don't feel shy, just ask me down below. Just ask me like, okay, if you want to know how I broke off the head of the screw, for some reason one of the screws came out quite easily, the other screw, it didn't want to come out. I thought there was Loctite in it. I did a blow dryer technique on it, it didn't want to come out. Last but not least, I took the bit, I stuck the T6 bit in there, and I took a hammer and then I hit it to maybe kind of shake it out of position, and to shake it loose, and then it did. But I think in that process of shaking it loose, like, it just the head of the knife, the head of the screw broke on me. Okay guys, yeah, just check this guy out. It's a great knife. If you can get the titanium version, you'll get less of a headache. If you like the OD green look, get the G10 one, but just be sure that is the complication. Okay guys, thanks, and as always, stay ready.